Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How you doing, Ken?
Exceptionally well. 'Tis a good day. Your side, Rory?
Oh, it's grey. It's like living in a Tupperware box. Because at this time, this podcast is recorded in October of 2020, and here in my part of the United Kingdom, we're heading towards grey skies and dark nights.
We are indeed. It is late autumn as we speak to you. I wonder where you find yourself. And welcome. It's episode 168 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We have 3 topics that we're going to be delving in today. We're going to start with our student check-in, where we're going to be speaking about developing your internal supervisor. We then move on to the Digital Counselling Revolution, where we recognize that technology plays a part in therapy these days. And we're looking at insurance for online work. But I think this is going to have something for everybody, because we're going to really be delving into insurance as a therapist and what that looks like. And then we end episode 168 with our topic called Practice Matters. That's where we look at something that may present itself in our actual therapy, and we're going to be looking at our personal beliefs in the therapy room, how those personal beliefs can kind of be present. But we'll start off with our check-in for students, where we look at something that would be relevant, topical for students at this time, an internal supervisor. I think this really spans way beyond students. It's important for students, but I think it's something that as qualified practitioners we need to look at as well. What is an internal supervisor, Rory?
Well, that was a question that I was asking myself in just about this time in 2002 when I started training, and my tutor Ali would talk about the internal supervisor, and she would rattle on about it all the time, and I just didn't know what an internal supervisor was. I thought it was someone you had to see in your home. I was a bit slow on the uptake, to be honest, in those days. So I read all the handouts and all the literature that was supplied, and I got the idea that it's basically developing a supervisory awareness. So, you literally have this Jiminy Cricket, this little voice on your shoulder. Anybody who's watched Disney's Pinocchio will know of this little Jiminy Cricket, this little character that sat on Pinocchio's shoulder and spoke about being moral and good and doing the right thing. And it was all very abstract until one day in the therapy room, I was posed with a huge ethical dilemma, which sadly, or probably not quite sadly, I can't share with you because it is confidential, but I can say it was a very unusual and very difficult ethical dilemma that I found myself in. And I found myself thinking about the options that were presented to me at that point. And it was at that point I realized that was my internal supervisor kicking in. My training, all the training that we'd done, all the literature we'd read, all the skill sessions that we'd done came in. It was one of the times where it just snapped in, and I was able to take a view, an ethical view, on my own without any recourse to anybody else, because there was only myself and the clients in the therapy room. And at that point, I could make a series of decisions, which when the client had left, I then enacted. And actually, it ended up okay. But my tutor said, that's your internal supervisor, that internal little mechanism that kicks in when you have to make a series of decisions that link to ethics. Internal supervisor.
I like the way you've described that very, very much. And it kind of is an indicator that you can read stuff in a book, you can read the handout, you can have the lecture on it, but it's when you experience it yourself, isn't it? That learning really, it's like that, it really sinks in. I love that you've put this topic, Rory, into our student check-in, and I think it fits beautifully here, because as a student I recommend that I recognize that you're building your competence as a student. You're learning. So it's like, I guess, riding a bike. When you first get on a bike, it's a little bit wobbly, and the handlebars are a little bit wobbly, and your full concentration is on how to ride that bike. So you're not thinking about the countryside that you might be passing at the time, or the fork in the road that might be coming at you ahead. You're thinking, am I balancing right? Am I steering right? Am I pedaling at the right speed? Am I keeping my balance? That's the stuff that you're doing. So it's almost a conscious incompetence. I know I can't really ride a bike. I'm trying to ride the bike, but if you've ridden a bike for some years, you don't think about that anymore. You get on the bike and you just ride the bike, and you're paying more attention to the field that you're passing, the flowers that you can see there, what birds are in the sky, what you're going to have for tea when you get home for your dinner, the fork in the road. And the same is true at some level in counselling, in that right in those early days when you're with your client, it is right that you are focusing on your skills and how the theory kind of pins into what the client is bringing. And you will go to your supervisor and you will kind of explain what happened in session. Your supervisor is going to be working on you with that, and it's your supervisor's job to pick stuff up. But as you develop, and as you become more competent with your skills and being with clients, you develop the internal supervisor, where you're able to fully be with your client, 100% right there with them. But they might say something that'll be like a little bing, a little flag, your internal supervisor will run into the session. That's my running noises in the background there, Rory.
I can hear that.
The internal supervisor runs into the session and goes, that's worth noting. And you might not even mention it back to the client. It might not be appropriate to mention it, but it will be the flag in, I need to look into that, or I need to be aware of that. And similarly, your internal supervisor might raise his or her head when you find a client maybe says something that brings up a feeling within you as the counsellor, that you have a feeling of, I don't know, it could be a feeling of being agitated, for example. And again, the internal supervisor would go, aha, what is that over there? Could that be a form of transference, counter-transference? And it's things that would normally be taken into supervision. You're able to begin to start seeing them for yourself.
Absolutely. And there's a really good book that I would recommend. It is from the psychoanalytical tradition, but sometimes there's a lot of commonality in modalities when it comes to things like ethics and supervision. And it's written by a British psychoanalyst, Patrick Casement. And he first coined the phrase learning from our mistakes. And he describes in the book supervision as an internal dialogue by which the analyst, now of course not everybody's a psychoanalyst, people are person-centered, can monitor moment by moment what is happening in the session and the various options open to them, the various ways they may respond to this, and the implication for the patient in each. Now, of course, that quote comes from the psychoanalytical tradition. However, I think it's a very good assessment of what can happen when you have to make an ethical decision in session. This was something that happened in session. And I want to say this wasn't the client's issue, it was mine. And the other thing I would say is the client never knew.
Yeah.
The client absolutely never knew what the ethical dilemma was or how I managed it. And the reason for that is they didn't need to know. It was something that I had to do. And Casement draws out a number of areas where we may have to use our internal supervisor. I've not mentioned transference and counter-transference for at least a week, Ken.
It's all right. I just mentioned it. So we're in good standing, Rory.
Yes. So, transference and counter-transference, boundaries, is the client pushing boundaries, games, sometimes clients will act out, projective identification. This is where clients may say something about others they really see in themselves, legal and ethical issues, and self-care. And, he finally comes with a summary of learning, which is what we learn from our clients. And I would agree with the great Patrick Casement in the final point. It allows us how best to serve our client and how to respond to their unique worldview. So I've created a little handout to help people with internal supervisor. To get that handout, you just go to counsellingtutor.com, click the podcast tab. look for podcast 168, and that handout is waiting for you. Just a little checklist for those of you who want to hone, develop, and strengthen your internal supervisor.
There it is. And I think as we kind of went into this, it's appropriate not just at student level, definitely at practitioner level, right up to master practitioner. You're going to still be working on that internal supervisor. And I like how you kind of drew the parallel to your experience of that the client doesn't know. And that's the whole point. And it's also referred to as helicopter, where you're in the room, so it is yourself, it is the client, that is all that is in the room. However, during competent practice of counselling, you're able to, part of you, your internal supervisor, is able to kind of lift above, almost kind of rise up above the counselling session and look down on what is happening both for the client and for you as the counsellor. And that is the well-honed, I guess, internal supervisor. And so important, and we need to listen to our internal supervisors because it's usually guiding us from good practice. I guess it's a good topic, and I thank you for bringing that, Rory. As Rory said, if you want to get that super duper handout, they're so useful and they are free of charge. It's our service to you. Go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, episode 168. The show notes are there where we kind of go over what we've covered today with external links to more in-depth into the topics we cover, but you get Rory's super duper handout on that page. So there we have it. That's our student check-in, and we're moving away from study into what is of the now, the digital counselling revolution, where we recognise how technology plays a part in our counselling practice in this day and age. And today we're going to be delving into insurance for online work.
Digital Counselling Revolution.
Well, for a number of years now, insurance has been compulsory for people who've been members of ethical bodies. When I started out, when the BACP was the BAC, it only added the P to it. It was only added the P when I started. There was no real mention of being insured for online work. But now, as a more mature profession and a more responsible profession, insurance is a real big part of our practice. Whether you are a student or whether you're a qualified practitioner, all who are facing clients should have the relevant insurance. And it strikes me that a lot of people just renew their insurance year on year. I know I do. Every year I renew my insurance. I get an insurance renewal, pay it, I get a new certificate of insurance. And that's another kind of year done, another ethical tick box ticked off. But when we work in the world of online counselling, we really do need to drill down into our insurance and actually check what our insurance covers us for. Now, it's worth remembering that online work was quite a niche activity until COVID struck. And now it's become, I would suggest, the major way that therapy is delivered, certainly here in the UK. And I wonder how many people have checked their insurance policy to find out, are they insured for online work? Are there any exceptions that you have? So, for instance, I have car insurance, like everybody who has a car and drives it on the road should have insurance. And I insure my car for domestic, social and work. And I pay a little premium for when I used to driving to my therapy room 2 miles down the road. I had to insure my car for that because technically I was using it for work. So, check your insurance. If you're renewing your insurance without actually checking it, and my view would be phone your insurance company up or look at your renewal and ask them, are you covered for online work? And also what their view of online work is, because it spans such a huge amounts of disciplines. It can be face-to-face, it can be by phone, it can be by text, could even be via chat room. It can be even asynchronous communication where you're in some form of chat app. So you really do need to check your insurance to make sure that you're covered for this. And of course, if you're working out of the country, Now, this is a very kind of contentious issue because nobody thought that we would be in this position of people working outside geographical borders. So you need to check with your insurance which countries you can actually work in. So there's a lot of work to be done with insurance. It's not just a case of renewing your quote and hoping for the best.
Yeah, I like what you've said there, Rory, and it goes beyond a ethical tick box. No, you need insurance, and that is an ethical requirement to practice. We need insurance. So what do? Well, we get some insurance and then tick that box and go, yep, well, we've done that. We've got the old insurance in place. Let's move on to the next thing we need to do. But it goes beyond that. It's about reading your policy, as you've mentioned there, Rory. And chances are, if you phone up your insurer and say, am I insured for online work? They may go, yes, you're insured for online work. I would take that a little step further and say, okay, that's great. Where in my insurance cover will I be able to read about that? And go and have a read so that you have an understanding of it. And I want to just draw a parallel to a friend of mine who lives in South Africa. And this is non-counselling related. But what happened, he runs a nursery school. Their family runs a nursery school. And they have business disruption insurance, so that if their business is disrupted for one or other reason, that they get compensated for that during the disruption of their business. And of course, COVID came along, and boy, was that a disruptor of businesses. So being grateful that the insurance was purchased, a call was made to the insurer to claim and say, our business has been disrupted. I would like to claim, please. To which the insurer said, oh, no, but you're not covered for that kind of disruption. And that's not the time you want to find out whether your insurance covers you on something or not. You don't want to find out at the time of putting a claim in. It's about taking the time and making your way through what can sometimes be a laboriously long document, Rory, because I've read over mine, boy, does it go on about what it does, what does and doesn't cover. But read through and have an understanding and shop around and see what the alternatives are. And again, you've said, Rory, that the behavior is sometimes to just renew. You get the email that says your insurance is up for renewal, and you go, okay, then I'll just renew it for another year. You have choice in the same way as your clients have a choice in which counsellor they see. You have a choice in who you place your insurance with. You can change that yearly if you wished to. Look around at the pricing and look around at the offering from the different insurers. It's part of good practice that once a year, or however often you choose to do it, that we look over those details of our practice in service of our clients, yes, but also to protect our practice. Because the only time you're going to need that insurer is when things go wrong. And it's a sad time when you're contacting an insurer, because it kind of indicates that you've got a dilemma on your hands. It can be a tricky time. So taking the time to kind of look into that before anything happens. Good practice.
Absolutely. And this is something that comes up time and time again, insurance in our Facebook group. So if you're not a member of our Facebook group, go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. You'll find us. We're a closed group, but we're a friendly bunch. Knock on the door, we'll let you in, and you'll find thousands and thousands of like-minded people all in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. Lots and lots of students, lots and lots of qualified colleagues, and lots of supervisors, a soup song, as we say, of tutors, all there debating and talking about counselling. So come on in. We want to see you. One final thought on insurance, Ken, is that sometimes the person you speak to at the helpline isn't a broker.
Yep.
So the broker is the person who works out the risk. They're the people who go, oh, no, you can't do this, or oh, no, you can't do that, or, they're the sort of people, if you want to modify your car, you speak to, and they say, tell me what you've done, and then they work out how your insurance quote alters. So if you are doing anything different, it's worth saying to the person on the helpline, what's the broker's view of this? Because sometimes on the helpline, they can say, oh, yeah, that's fine. But actually, there can be a bit of a disconnect between the kind of customer salesperson that you speak with and the broker. The broker is the person who manages the risk, looks at what's being offered, looks at the risk elements, and then puts a price to that, and that price is your renewal fee. So I think it's really useful if you're doing something, if you're doing online work, to really have that long dialogue with your insurance company and make sure it's written down. Having an agreement on the phone really doesn't mean anything. You need to see it in writing. You need to hold up your renewal and see it on the paper, because that is your evidence should you ever have to make a claim. So it's a bit of an in-depth thing, insurance, isn't it, Ken?
It is. It's you mentioned that don't take what is said on the phone at ear value, I guess you could say there. Yeah. I worked for some time in a call center, and we would give information over the phone. And then when the person went ahead to make a purchase or to take that on further, there's a little disclaimer that is read out, and if you phone up and you try and buy some insurance or something like that, you'll notice either pre-recorded before the phone is answered, they will say this phone is recorded for our training purposes, and they give a little bit of a disclaimer there that basically the disclaimer says that anything that is said verbally in the phone call is not legally binding. The stuff that's legally binding is in the document that you sign, which is your actual cover. So really read it. Even if they've said, yeah, no, don't worry about that, that's fine. Just read it. Like you say, Rory, see it there in black and white. This is a topic that we cover in depth in our online and telephone counselling course. And it's about training and educating yourself. If you are working online and you're looking for some training, or if you are thinking of working online and you want to get the training in place to work safely and ethically with your clients, and you want to check out our course, then just go to counsellingtutor.com and you can check out our online and telephone counselling course. That course has now, at the time of the recording, been taken by well over 7,000 therapists, counsellors, psychotherapists. We have over 1,000 reviews where they kind of give their honest and true reflection of how they found that course. So counsellingtutor.com if you're interested in that. As we move away now from the digital counselling revolution, can't say revolution this morning, Rory. I wouldn't be very good at singing Prince's song. That had revolution in it. We're going into practice matters. That's where we're going, where we're going to look at personal beliefs in the therapy room.
Practice matters.
So a few years ago, I was sat in a little level 2 class that I was teaching, and we got to talk about unconditional positive regard and being non-judgmental. And one of the learners in the room was very vocal about how non-judgmental he was. He went to great lengths to share his own personal journey, which was one of struggle and difficulty, and said that he could never judge anybody else because of the experience he's had. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, fantastic. His own kind of humbling in his own life journey had made it clear to him that being judging of other people would be for him the wrong thing to do. So on the next lesson, I gave them an ethical dilemma, and I said, pretend you're working with a merchant banker, someone who works in the city. He comes to you for therapy because he's feeling a little left behind. He's feeling a little anxious because he's not hit his bonus and he can't buy his new Porsche car. And the very same person became very animated, and we had about 15 minutes of hating of bankers and the financial system. And I respectfully pointed out that actually sometimes our personal beliefs can impact directly on our way we work with clients. And in fact, many years ago when I trained, we were given a handout, and I think it was from Mearns and Thorne, two great writers in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. And they talked about, what would happen if you were a Liverpool football supporter and you worked with a Manchester United supporter, and the Manchester United supporter started talking about football and how rubbish Liverpool was. What would happen? And for those of you listening outside the UK, there's great rivalry between soccer football teams, Liverpool and certainly Manchester United. So it can be a blind spot for us. And I think that sometimes we have to be thoughtful of our personal beliefs. The clue is in the name here, they're personal. And I'm a great believer in keeping I have a lot of personal beliefs, but I try and keep them out of the therapy arena because, I'm working with a client's frame of reference, not my own. And I met a lot of people, including clients, who've had very different personal beliefs on a range of issues to myself. But I'm always, a great believer in free speech in the therapy room and allowing the clients to speak about what they want. And I think that sometimes nerves can be touched. I know my nerves have been touched. When someone said something and I feel myself going, I'm going to have to put that to one side for supervision. It's really important that we understand our own personal belief mechanism and manage it when we're working with clients.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to episode 166 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. It went live on Saturday, the 17th of October. So you can go and look that up on our website. Go to counsellingtutor.com, click on podcast, go find episode 166. And we speak about the Johari window as a self-development tool where we recognize that there are certain parts of us that are unseen to self. Some of them might be seen by other people. They might go, he or she is such and such, and we may not be able to see that ourselves. But there are also elements of our self that are not seen to us nor to someone else, but they exist and they I guess, contribute to how we are, how we behave. And our personal beliefs are an interesting area. When I started training as a counsellor, I thought that part of the training of counsellor was to look at my personal beliefs, kind of get over them or change my personal beliefs. But we're talking about stuff that is very ingrained from childhood, the way you were brought up, the messages that you were given, the society you grow up, the family you grow up in, the culture you grow up in, the country you grow up in. You're receiving messages all the time that is creating who we are as a person. And I later learned that it's not about that really. It's the personal development is about just recognizing what my own personal beliefs are so that I can silo them off within therapy sessions so that they don't contaminate, they don't interrupt and contaminate. And it's through self-development that we kind of find that. I found it really interesting, Rory, when you were telling the story of the student who said, I'm certainly not judgmental. It reminded me of the shadow self. It's always very interesting if somebody says, I am not such a such. Whatever it is they say that they are not, and then insert what I am not here. There is a theory of shadow self where we kind of do that. We kind of speak negatively about things that we may have, and maybe it's just unseen to self, and that's part of this personal growth, this personal development. But I've certainly had instances where my own personal beliefs have been in the therapy room. They have contaminated my therapy, and it was only picked up in supervision. And I have no doubt that it may even happen today. It's not something that you can say, I've been practicing for years. Now, no longer do my personal beliefs come into my therapy room. I accept that they may, because I bring myself into my therapy room. It's just about being really vigilant and looking about that, and also being mindful that your client will most certainly be bringing their personal beliefs and their truths. The way they grew up, what their culture was, they're going to be bringing that in, and that is going to be their truths. And they may bring a truth that is 100% truth for them that may conflict with one of your truths. And it's an interesting phenomenon. We have to shine a light on it.
Yes, and sometimes clients who've had very difficult journeys or very difficult histories may come in angry. They may project that onto us. They may say things that, if they worked, if it was said in a workplace environment, could get them in a lot of difficulty with HR and colleagues. And I think sometimes we have to be patient. Sometimes when clients act out like this, there's usually a reason behind it. And my clinical thinking over the years has developed in to, if I do get a client who's saying things that, are particularly difficult to hear, I always wonder what's going on behind that. What has brought the client to this point? And usually if one exercises patience and listens very deeply, you can usually find the point at which these opinions are formed. And usually that, in my experience, that actually comes out in therapy. It doesn't need any guidance or direction. Usually clients talk about what's going on for them, and they sometimes can project out. So, I think the story of the merchant banker and the Porsche car is a good indication of that. It's a person who was struggling. If you take away the wealth and the and the title, it's someone who's struggling. They're feeling left behind. They're feeling not good enough. And we work with that all the time in the therapy room. And I think sometimes we need to be mindful of that, specifically in a time where people, are not backwards at coming forwards in their kind of political standpoints. We need to be really thoughtful about that and allow the client that space to expand their opinions, and we as co-journey people in their lives help them understand where they're at, where that opinion may have come from. So it's an interesting one, but it is a blind spot, I think, for every therapist.
Yeah.
I've supervised and taught, as you have, Ken, and it comes up in supervision a lot, where someone said, I've had this terrible thought, and it comes out and there's a lot of shame around it and anxiety. And my response to that is, well, you're a human being. You're a human being. You have thought that. Let's just look at it. Let's explore it. But let's not go down the route of blaming people for it. We have our opinions, and sometimes others will grind like gears in a gearbox. I think as long as we're aware of it and we can take it to supervision, then we're just doing the best we can with that, I think.
Yeah, by shining a light on this, we're just bringing up the topic. We're not saying what you do is this and what you do is that. And no. I'm certainly, Rory, not the therapist that I was 5 years ago. Mm. And I'm not the therapist that I will be in 5 years' time. And it's not, we say it so often, CPD is not just learning another technique or learning about another presentation. CPD extends beyond that. I mean, we spoke today about re-looking at your insurance. That's CPD. You can put that down as CPD, looking at your insurance, and that's based on your practice. And certainly looking into self is great CPD, who we are and how we develop, and recognizing that we have the personal beliefs that can contaminate our practice, no matter what level we're practicing at, no matter how long we've been doing it, and recognizing that our clients, the other side of the coin, will come in with their personal beliefs that may differ from ours. And it's not our job to judge or to try to change any of that. It's to understand that person for who they are, the human being that they are, and the pain that they're experiencing. And it's a big ask. It's a big ask being a therapist. It just is. And I just, once again, I just want to salute all listening to this that are either studying to be therapists or are out there making the difference that we strive to make as therapists, because it is a big ask. It is a complex journey. And I think it's communities like we have at Counselling Tutor on our Facebook group, this podcast that brings us together in recognition of that, I think is worth doing, Rory. It's certainly why we do it, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, what I would say, what I sometimes say to my students and certainly my supervisees when they bring this up is I say, go and have a look at Terence, the Roman playwright who famously said, I am human, nothing human is alien to me. And I think it's a wonderful thing to aspire to as a therapist. Maybe it's a journey more than a destination, but to try and get that sense of every human is individual. When someone is very different, try not to think of it as an alien concept. Try and think of it as a human concept. and one that you can engage with. You don't have to agree with everything that clients say or everything that anybody says, but I think to start from that position, I am human. Nothing human is alien to me.
I do like that, Rory. And I'm just reminded that there is actually a lecture that you kind of pointed out before we started recording this. We have a lecture. We've got a library of lectures. We call it our CPD library. And in that very library, there is a library on exploring beliefs, and it's a really worthwhile lecture. It's about 40 minutes that really delving deep into personal beliefs and the part they play in our own lives, in our therapy room, in our client presentation. So if you are a member of the Counselling Tutor CPD library, jump in, go to the search and put in beliefs or personal beliefs, and that lecture will come up. And if you're interested in knowing more about the Counselling Tutor CPD library, it is absolutely jam-packed, full of lectures and resources for continuous professional development, ranging from client presentations to practice-related lectures to personal development lectures. If you're interested in that, you can get all that information at our website, counsellingtutor.com. It's all there on the homepage.
Yes, well, it's been an interesting walk through the topics today. We started off with developing your internal supervisor. We spoke about the work of Patrick Casement and developing that kind of internal dialogue within yourself. We went on to the Digital Counselling Revolution and talked about the importance of scrutinising your insurance to make sure that you are covered for the world of online work. And then finally, we talked about personal beliefs in the therapy room. And we talked about a link to a fantastic lecture in our CPD library by Emma Chapman, who talks about exploring your personal beliefs. So as always, stay grounded, stay safe, and join the digital revolution.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.